Forza fam, it's Wednesday, July 24th, 2024, and the last few videos, last few messages I've shared, we've talked about being the throwing standard and what that means to you and how we define that for ourselves. And somebody asked a question about how Lewis and I defined that when he was an athlete, and we never really talked about being a standard as so much as talked about picking something and attempting to excel at it to the best of our ability. And I'll give you an example. I think I've shared this story before, but during Lewis's senior year, we didn't really necessarily talk about numbers so much as expectations about what we thought it was going to take for him to get to nationals and ultimately win nationals. And we were at a meet at Ithaca College, and Lewis went, I think, 1975, and that's the farthest I've ever seen him throw. And an athlete from another school approached him and said, is that European weight technique that you're using? Because it's really good. And without hesitation, both of us at the same time said, it's Puerto Rican weight technique. And we just kind of like chuckled about it, and the other throwers kind of left, confused about that. Because I, as a coach, I've never really tried to instill a specific technique on my athletes. Once we get the basics down, learn to turn, basic fundamentals in the shot put discus, I try and adapt my coaching style to best meet the needs of the athlete. And that's where I think being the throwing standard really comes into play, because we're trying to be our own standard. We're trying to beat our own standard of excellence, whatever that is and however we define it for ourselves, right? And I think it comes in many different forms and throughout the course of our lives, different facets of our lives of how we define standards of excellence, right? One of my favorite wrestling promos of all time is Four Horsemen from maybe like 86, I think, 87, something like that, maybe 86. Tully Blanchard, they're on after Arn Anderson has created the Four Horsemen. Tully Blanchard's being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and he goes, "This is the standard of excellence. Be whatever you want to be, but be the very best," right? And he throws up the Four Horsemen sign. And I think that's really important for us, because I think we get caught up in chasing, and I've been guilty of this too. Chasing ghosts, I've called it in the past. Dan McKim's talked about chasing ghosts also. That we chase this allure of something that we think might make us happy, but in reality, once we possibly achieve it, or the goal is so far out of reach that we can't, we become disenchanted with it. And if we have a bit of a paradigm shift and a mindset shift and look at it from a different lens, from a different perspective, then I think what we're looking at is how can we best define those things for ourselves, right? And I've spent a lot of time the last few months really thinking about manifestation and manifesting these different parts of my life. And for such a long time, it was driven by external factors that were really out of my control, right? Coach X number of athletes, write this many articles to get submitted for peer review, like do all these different things that the process of doing them should have been the fun part, but for so many years that was lost on me. And what I've really started focusing in now is enjoying the labor of getting where we need to go, or where I want to go, okay? So like in sport, for example, I have a triathlon race coming up in August, and I did not put a time goal to that because I've never done an Olympic race before, and I have no idea how my body's going to react to trying to run a 10K after riding my bike for 26 miles, because I haven't done that in training yet. I've done short runs off the bike, but not a full 6 miles. I don't know how my body's going to react out of the water after swimming a mile when I get on the bike. So I've just been enjoying the grind of train 4 to 5 days a week, get all my training sessions in, try and be as dialed in as possible with nutrition. I'm still losing a ton of weight. I'm in the best exterior physical shape of my life. I'm working on the inside part, but the outside part is getting much better. And I'm enjoying it. That doesn't mean that every mile of my 35-mile bike rides is pleasurable, but I enjoy doing those things. When I trained when I was younger and had this pie-in-the-sky idea of wanting to try and qualify for the Olympic trials in the hammer, I was so caught up and fixated on numbers that training was becoming not fun, and I was getting like burned out, and I didn't know what burnout was at the time, but I knew that I was regressing, and I didn't know enough to help myself to pull back on that. Now being 42, I got a little better idea, a little bit more wherewithal, and I'm able to define those things more clearly for myself and for the athletes that I work with. So I think when we, just to get back to be the throwing standard, be your own throwing standard. With chasing and with this external validation, right? These dopamine hits that we get every time somebody likes a picture or video or makes a positive comment about something. It's eventually it's not going to be as motivating, as exciting. The dopamine hit is just not going to be as powerful as it once was. And if we don't wrap our minds around the idea and the concept of loving what we do for the sheer enjoyment of it, that's where the frustration, that's where the burnout, that's where the fatigue of, oh my gosh, the monotony that I have to do this again, comes into play. But I don't know. I think that's the best way or at least right now, the best way that I can verbalize trying to define that. If I was coaching Lewis today and we were starting over again and he was a freshman, I think they'd be deeper and more powerful conversations, and you'll learn about that in the book, The Throwing Standard, when it comes out in a few months, that we had those deep conversations. More often than not, it was more about life than actual training and throwing, and that worked for us. That was our standard. That was the standard of excellence that we were trying to build towards, and it takes a special relationship. It takes trust between individuals to be able to verbalize those desires, those wants, those needs, to cooperate together. And that's why I'm such a huge proponent of coach-athlete relationships, and really diving in and researching and just trying to figure out how all of those intricacies work and what we as coaches can do to better help our athletes achieve the goals that they set out for themselves. And we need to start with how we define that. How do we define what our process goal is? What do we do during the day, every day, that's going to help us get there? What are those mundane tasks that we need to fall in love with to help us be our own standard? I'm talking about the throwing standard because I'm a track coach and I coach throwers, right? So how do we define that? And the better we as coaches can help our 12 to 24 year olds, let's say, if we're coaching high school all the way up through collegiate and even post-collegiate. I think that's the key. If we can get our athletes to come up with their own definition, right? So they have autonomy in defining what their expectation is, what their reality could be, the buy-in is going to be exponential, right? But if we as coaches try to enclose our athletes in these boxes of this is where I want you to be, or this is where you should be, it might put undue expectations, unnecessary unnecessary stress and possible anxiety for our athletes if we go meet after meet after meet and we don't get any closer to where we want to go. That's where the regression can come into play, and that's where maybe resentment comes into play. But if our athletes define that for us, and our athletes are able to fall in love with their definition and what they want to do and what they want to be, and from my experiences and for what research suggests, it makes the journey so much more worthwhile for our athletes. And I think ultimately that's our top goal, right? We want to make sure we keep our athletes safe, we want to make sure we keep them healthy, and we want to make sure we keep them engaged in what we're doing together in order to help them get where they want to go.